Ancient culture of the Maya of Mesoamerica was a colorful, dynamic, and complex society. They lived in a diverse landscape that included sprawling deserts, volcanic mountains along the Pacific coast, tropical forests, and swampy lowlands that received 120 inches of rain each year. Before the arrival of the Europeans, Mesoamericans shared cultural and societal traditions that were learned from the earliest known inhabitants, the Olmecs. These people passed on their beliefs to later groups such as the Toltecs, Mayans, and Aztecs. They had unified definitions about how to grow food, distribute food, and what constituted government and how the world worked. The land of the Maya lies in what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and western Honduras. Their civilization lasted for 3,000 years, from 1500 BC to 1500 AD. Maya civilization in particular produced awe-inspiring temples and pyramids, highly accurate calendars, mathematics, and hieroglyphic writing. The Mayans built altars, lintels, ball courts, thrones, monumental stairways, and distinctive stone sculptures. They worked with wood and semi-precious stones, made ceramics, painted murals, and made stucco models. They wrote and made books. Early Mayans built simple thatched houses. Over time, their buildings became the wonders we see today. There are no known recorded individual architects, but there is clear evidence of a tremendous amount of skilled knowledge. Buildings were adorned with stone carvings and relief structures. The walls were plastered and painted with murals. The symbolism of their beliefs permeated every design on their buildings. The ancient Mayans created their structures to reproduce the myths that were central to their ideology. While most of their texts were destroyed by the Spaniards in their efforts to replace the pre-Columbian religions with Catholicism, some works survived. Knowledge today comes from inscriptions and imagery, and from the text of the Popol Vuh, a book translated in the 17th century that recorded the history of the Quiché Maya. One of the most primary stories in Mayan culture that explained their worldview was the story of the Maize Twins. When playing ball one day, the twin maize gods disturbed the lords of Xibalban, the Mayan underworld. The lords summoned the boys to the underworld to answer for their misbehavior, subjected them to a series of trials, and killed them when they failed. They buried the boys in the ball court of the underworld. The Xibalians took the head of the older twin and hung it from a gourd tree next to the ball court as a lesson to anyone who might tempt their wrath. The daughter of the lord of the underworld ignored the warning and went to visit the skull. The skull not only spoke to her, but it spat in her hand and made her pregnant. After escaping the underworld, she gave birth to a second set of boys, called the Hero Twins. These boys once again upset the underlords and were subjected to a series of trials and ball games. In their case, they defeated the lords of death and resurrected their fathers from the ball courts. The fathers, maize gods, were reborn as infants and quickly grew into adulthood. They were then paddled to the place of creation by two gods. The third god they awoke was patron of merchants and warriors. He destroyed the third creation with a great flood. When the maize gods arrived at the place of the new creation, they sprang up from a crack in the back of a cosmic turtle. They were guided in building a new structure, and 500 years later, the maize gods completed the fourth creation. 4 sides and corners of the cosmos were set in place, and the cosmic tree was erected. This tree was also thought of as the Milky Way, arching across the sky with its roots on the southern horizon and branches to the north. The raising of this tree created the space in which we live, the fourth creation. On that day, The maize god spun the heart of the sky in the motion used by weavers spinning thread. This spinning corresponds to the motion of the constellations around the north pivot of the sky. This motion is the basis of all time perception for human beings, so that the gods gave symmetry and order to both space and time by their action in erecting a tree and setting out the four corners and four sides of the cosmos. The ball court was the arena in which the Mayans reenacted this myth. They confronted life and death, fate and chance. The maize gods lost the game and died for it. They remade creation again and again. It is common to see recreations of the ball game in Mayan artwork. The sarcophagus of the ruler Pakal is also adorned with symbols of this mythic journey down the Milky Way tree road into the underworld. Rebirth and resurrection were promised to Pakal, who was also being compared to the maize god. Other symbols on the sarcophagus are the white flower, which symbolizes soul. There is also a supernatural bird that declared the capacity for magic and the engagement of the shamanistic journey of trance. The ruler is shown holding a double-headed snake that intertwines to the tree branches. The snake is wound to look as an umbilical cord that connects him to the sky and the Milky Way. Holding this shows that he controlled this connection to the source of power and wisdom. Another myth that is often the inspiration of Mayan artwork is that of the Earth Mother. She is sculpted as a woman wearing a skirt of writhing snakes. She wears a necklace made of human hearts, hands, and skulls. Her face is made up of two serpents facing each other, and her hands and feet are clawed. Most artistic representations of this goddess emphasize her deadly side, because Earth, as well as loving Mother, is the insatiable monster that consumes everything that lives. She represents the devouring Mother in whom both the womb and the grave exist. She both consumes and regenerates life. Many murals depict another belief of the Mayans, the importance of human sacrifice to the gods. In the later years, the most common form of human sacrifice was heart extraction. This usually took place in the courtyard or upon the summit of the pyramid temple. A sacrificial knife made from flint was used to cut into the ribs just below the victim's left breast and pull out a still beating heart. Depending upon the ritual, sometimes the corpse would be thrown down the pyramid steps to the courtyard below. If it was a notably courageous warrior who had been sacrificed, then the corpse would be cut into portions and parts would be eaten by attending warriors and other bystanders. The hands and feet were given to the priest, who, if they belonged to a war captive, wore the bones as a trophy. While this practice is rather gruesome, the Mayans were remarkably civilized. They developed a writing system that is considered to be one of the most advanced on the American continent. Their writing was extremely challenging for historians and archaeologists to decipher. Through tireless efforts and over decades of work, there are now more than 750 Maya glyphs that can be read. Deciphering these opened the doors to understanding Mayan culture. The hieroglyphs began as pictorial representations but developed into ideographical representation, and also in some cases acted as a phonetic alphabet. Names of months, people, places, and cities all have their own glyphs. Sentences were formed by grouping glyphs into rows and columns. There was a creativity in the language, and that there were many ways to depict the same thing. New ways were constantly being developed. Animal forms were sometimes added to enrich the imagery. There is a grace and artfulness that can be seen in the hieroglyphs. Mayan civilization fell after the arrival of the Europeans in the 1500s. However, there are still over 7 million Mayan living today. They speak over 24 languages and are connected to both the modern and ancient worlds. They have been oppressed from every angle, but the Maya have maintained many of the old ways. Like their ancestors, most Mayan households engage in corn farming and many produce crafts. They are most known for their beautiful yarn-based textiles. These are woven into such things as blouses, dresses, skirts, bags, and blankets. In contrast to their pre-Columbian ancestors, however, many of the men must also leave their villages for the lowlands, where they work part of the year on coffee and cotton plantations. The ancient Mayan calendar has also survived. Many communities still have shaman priests or day keepers whose job it is to keep track of the round of days according to the Maya calendar. Researchers learn much about the ancient Mayan practices from the traditional rituals by the modern Maya. Ancient practices have been fused with Roman Catholicism, but still retain practices distinct to Mayan people. It is heartening to see an indigenous group that has been able to maintain so many facets of their culture despite the oppression acted upon them. One way that they can be supported is by spending money on their arts and crafts. The rich mythology of the ancient Mayans continues to feed modern Mayans and Mexican culture.